welcome to Femcasters, a podcast and community where feminine wiles and ferocious female voices collide.
Femcasters was born from the idea that we can change the world one broadcast at a time. We are here to unite and elevate the voices of silence breakers just like you, girl-wide.
Let's kick it, Corinna.
Kick it!
Femcasters, we have Adam Sinkus in the lounge, and this is going to be a conversation that not only educates us, but probably entertains us as well.
Adam has a history of over 10 years in business and marketing, so we'll have a lot to talk about. I've got about 20 in that field, so I'm sure it will be a lively discussion. He really works on building an authentic brand through podcasting, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm excited.
And I have negative 10 years experience, and we all balance each other out.
True. There's no such thing as negative experience. Jules doesn't like to talk about the fact that she probably knows social media more than most people who actively work in it. So she's got her own little branding cap on 90% of the time and gets people to say things like obsessed 15 times in a single conversation. So we'll see if we can convince you to do that too.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. So, Adam, I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about your background and what you're presently doing with your experience. And then I really like to dig into this concept of using those podcasts to build authenticity into your brand.
Yeah, no. So for me, my background starts in marketing and business operations. I spent a lot of years in the corporate world. I escaped the corporate world because I realized that I fell in love with the process of marketing, right? And what I've learned over time is that people don't connect with brands just because they have stuff. They connect with brands because of the people and the messaging within those brands. And that's something that I've really taken a passion to as I've learned digital marketing. And fast forward to COVID happening, and I had an unique opportunity where I had all kinds of free time. And like a lot of people, I decided, what the heck, we're going to jump into this podcasting world feet first. And so I started my podcast, The Winning Tactics. And since then, I've become just hugely passionate about how you can use podcasting to really build your voice and your brand. And it builds it in a different way than print media and websites and all that other stuff that's out there that we see in traditional marketing. And so, fast forward 2022, we're building an entire brand around how you build your brand in podcasting. So
Podcasting, smodcasting. Everyone's a podcaster, right, Adam? But you're doing it differently. And I think just knowing how you distinguish yourself with the winning tactics, because I believe everybody listening to us right now is a podcaster, a potential podcaster, dipping their toes in the podcasting pond. But I think you do it differently.
One of the things I focus on, because I spend so much time on like Clubhouse, right? And I see all over Clubhouse this messaging, well, you got to monetize your podcast. You got to monetize your podcast. And they're talking about things like affiliate marketing and sponsorship and things like that. And all those things are great, right? But the way I monetize my podcast is a couple of different ways. First and foremost, it's about...
We're going right for the money.
We're going right for the money.
Adam.
I dive right in. I really focus on how can I bring the audience that I'm trying to attract in my business to my show. So my show mirrors what I do in my business, which is help small and mid-sized businesses. The other thing is I've found ways to bring guests onto my show that I'm interested in working with, right? Because it's way easier to go, hey, come be on my podcast than it is, hey, will you join me for an hour-long sales call? So, I think we have to get around this fallacy that podcasting, it doesn't have to be this, like, I have to have affiliates and sponsors to make money. There's so many ways to make money from podcasting and so many ways to build your brand from a podcast that goes so far beyond just, traditional marketing methods, and really your voice is more authentic than anything you will ever write.
Well, I'm going to use a word that Jules hates. It's the F word.
Don't say it. I know what you're going to say.
I mean, the reality is that
Great word.
that's essentially what you're able to do with the podcast is create a funnel that leads people to your business. And ultimately, you've already earned their trust because you've shared with them a deeper view into what it is that you're doing. So I love that. And I personally also just think that people, when they seek to monetize too early, they almost lose credibility because it's like that's the ask or that's the focus as opposed to trying to just produce great content, which is, I think, something that we should all be focused on. Getting good quality audio, great guests, have enticing conversations, pull out the best in those people, work at getting better at the craft. And then once you're really chugging, those opportunities are just going to reveal themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the things that I always tell my clients, right, is there is a million of whatever you do out there, right? For me, there's 350,000 active podcasters in the world, right? So
how many? 350?
345,000 is like the last number that I officially saw, which is about a month ago, right? So inherently to say I'm a podcaster is nothing unique to any of those other 345,000 other podcasters out there, right? But what makes me unique, what makes my podcast unique is what my voice brings to that show, right? And so in the case of the Winning Tactics, it's all about that authenticity and genuine business help, right? And so, so you are wholeheartedly 100% the one thing that sets your brand apart from any other brand out there. There's nothing else. You can't copy somebody else exactly, right? Everybody comes with their own experience. And so this is where audio and podcasting becomes so powerful because it is impossible for you to mimic somebody else's brand and not be authentic to yourself.
So what is your brand?
So my brand is the Winning Tactics Media Group, where we are rapidly expanding this year from just being a podcast focused around business and driving traffic to my marketing company to now we are going to be launching podcast education services. We will be also doing podcast launch services for people if they are interested in, I want to put my unique voice out there, but I don't know how, or I don't have the time to produce all of this stuff because let's be real, it takes some time to put all this podcast stuff together. And then eventually we're going to be moving into building an entire media network around business podcasts this year as well. So that is my podcasting brand as it stands right now and where it's kind of going over the next 6 or 8 months here.
Yeah, I think I was asking a different question though.
Okay. Dang it.
I'm asking, what is your personal brand? Like, what are you? Like when people think of you, like what is the thing they say about you after you've left the room?
So, the biggest thing about me is that I am a no BS, no fluff, no, I'm going to tell you how it is. And if I disagree with you, I'm going to let you know that I disagree with you. Right. And so I mimic that in everything I do because I don't pussyfoot around with things. This is what it is. And this is how I'm going to do it or how we're going to do it or, how I feel about that, because at the end of the day, being authentic is being true. Right. And I think so often we spend so much time as brands trying to, find out what's PC, what's exactly the right wording so we don't hurt anybody's feelings. And you know what, I'm going to tell you what it is and we can discuss. If you don't like it, we can discuss it and find center ground.
I got the sense that was true when you said you escaped the corporate world. It was that specific.
Corporate golden handcuffs.
I was like, okay, this guy doesn't mince words.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Also, from what I know of Adam, he is authentic. He is a nice guy though, too. And he is not that kind of person that is trying to take you for a quick buck, and he knows what he's doing and he's time tested. So, your personal brand in terms of how you see yourself, but also how others see you. And that's, how I've come to know you as a real genuine human being that is walking the walk and talking the talk.
I mean, and he's willing to be in a group called Femcasters with no
Right. That's the scary part. He's open.
Hey, you know what? You got to go. You got to explore different spaces. And in all honesty, when you seek to find new spaces, new people, new relationships, you open yourself to new opportunities that you never know where they're going to go. So, it's all about how can we help each other grow and build and be successful together, because there's plenty of room for all of us to be successful.
I love that because so many people are thinking about the bottom line. So many people are thinking about how to do it for themselves. But as Corinna, you made a nod too, when we go beyond ourselves, when we are serving others, that's where the sales are made. The sales are made on our ingenuity, our authenticity, our realness, and our ability to change other people's lives.
I also wonder, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I've been podcasting only for roughly a year, but in that time have learned so much. And I have noticed that there aren't very many women on the production side of podcasts. And I wondered if you had any experience or thought about why that might be.
I think a lot of it is.
I think a lot of it is that, you know, women rule the world and are doing different things, right, Adam?
Yeah, no,
You froze, so we didn't.
I know.
anything.
I filled it in for you. Women rule the world. I was just putting words into your mouth, but that's what women do. But we do appreciate, of course.
No,
viewpoint.
I really think there's this stigmatism around engineering, and I love seeing women getting involved in the STEM areas, in STEM careers, and it's happening more and more. And so I really think part of it comes from the stigmatism, the old school, engineers typically was a male dominated field, and it's starting to shift. And by all means, I am all about finding talented people, right?
Yeah.
And that's genuinely, I don't care what your makeup is. I don't care where you come from, like a girl, boy, it doesn't matter to me, right? If you are genuinely talented in what you do, that's going to shine through. And, one of the things that I really focus on is teaching brands and people how to help that story shine through in a way that's truly genuine. And that's, I think, what we have to, put back into that conversation is how do we make ourselves shine through if we want to be in a space?
And I love that you touched upon the story, and stories are everything. We are nothing without our story. Without our stories as entrepreneurs, podcasters, speakers, writers, we are just a bunch of pages or a product or a service. So our stories help us connect with the audience. And I know there's a story beneath why you're doing this. And actually, I go back to a conversation you and I had a while back, and you're leading your family. You have, I believe, a son and a daughter. And I even talked to you about your daughter being on my Obsessed podcast because I thought it was so cool. And what you're doing, you're leading your family, you're leading the women in your lives, the children in your lives to do things differently. So I would love to hear this story.
Yeah. So, I do lead my household. And, one of the things that I always encourage my wife, who started a business this last year, I think just over a year now, gosh, time flies, but doing custom tumblers and t-shirts and gift items. And I've always encouraged her. I'm encouraging, my son who's getting into voice acting and finding his path there. And now, my daughter has her own set of unique challenges, which I recently talked about. And I don't talk about a whole lot out into the world because it's not what defines her, but her epilepsy and her cerebral palsy, you present a different level of challenges. And now as she gets older, she's realizing it's okay to talk about her story and talk about her challenges. And so now she's pushing herself out there and wanting to be more forward about that. And so it's really cool to see and sit back and watch, just from encouragement and just from how can I help you guys get to where you want to go? See them just taking that and running with it, full steam ahead and being incredibly successful.
And that's amazing. And I love what you said about your daughter. Just it's not what defines her, it's her voice that is going to help her rise and live her best life. So we want her to be an official Femcaster for sure. We are going to roll out the red carpet for her because we support Femcasters of any age, any sex, anything, because it is about your voice and your story. And I love that you are leading your family into such different directions and empowering them with their skill sets, empowering them with what their true talents are. Because I don't think a lot of people have that sort of parentage. You go to school, you go to college, you become a blah, 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 you make a certain amount of money, and then you die. So there's a lot in between. So you're doing that, Adam. And that speaks to your, that genuine character that you do exhibit quite effortlessly.
No, I really appreciate that. It's something that I think, we have to get out of this, so to speak, this box that I think a lot of us live in, and realize that I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, I don't care if you go to college, you just need to find some way to educate yourself beyond high school. Right. And whatever that looks like, that could be trade school, that could be, certificate programs, that could be, you just need to educate yourself beyond and build a set of skills that can't be replaced. Right. And so, to me, it's really about, what is your genuine path? What is that path that you're passionate about? Because when you start walking down that path, it becomes much less work and much more fun along the way. Right. And, when I'm elbow deep into designing a web page or planning my next podcast episode, there's just a passion there that no matter how frustrating, like, because I can't get one little widget to work, or I can't get a hold of one guest that I really want to have on my show, no matter that frustration, at the end of the day, I get done with that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had so much fun doing that. I figured it out. I won, I succeeded. And then we move on. Right. And the journey itself becomes so self-fulfilling. Right. And that's what I think is different about people that just take this in the box approach. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go get a job in corporate America. I'm going to work for somebody else. Right. They're maybe doing something that they love, but they haven't defined their why. They've just gone, I like numbers, so I'm going to be an accountant. I like business, so I'm going to go be an operations manager. They haven't found that true why, that true driver of what makes them tick to go in and go, every day, I love what I'm doing, and there's nothing that can stop me from being successful in it.
So what you're speaking to is finding their authentic purpose. And if that aligns with what they're doing for work, then they're going to be more inspired.
Oh yeah.
Be more likely to start their own podcast too.
For sure.
So
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, as we're talking about authenticity as it relates to podcasts and finding that voice and bringing it forward, getting really comfortable with what it is and then how it connects with the audience you're seeking to build a connection with. I just wonder if there's a couple of tips that you would like to give our community to help them find that authentic voice so that they can be more effective in whatever it is that they're doing, whether or not they have a show.
Yeah, for sure. I strongly encourage people to start with your why and really practice your story. Like, I'm not saying you like write it down, script it, so you tell your story the exact same way every time, every show, right? But practice your story, understand what parts of your story are important, where your story can connect with your audience, right? So, is it that, I started a podcast because of, XYZ, or I started my business because of XYZ pain point, I missed something in the market, but find those points that are important to your audience, and then practice, how do you layer that stuff together in different ways so that every time you present that story, it can be a little bit different, have a little bit of a unique perspective to it, because
Fresh.
keep it fresh. Cause that's one thing nobody wants. I listen to, or I listened to a guest that had reached out to me that wanted to be on my show, and I listened to like 4 different shows that this guest was on, and every show was almost the exact same show. Like and so when I got done listening to that, I really took a step back and I said, do I really just want to tell the same story that he told on the last 4 shows? And, so it made me stop and think, right, about, is his message truly authentic? Is he really providing something of value, or is he just pushing himself, to sell his brand, right? Is this a sales pitch versus a genuine story?
Mhm.
And so that's where I tell people to start, right? Learn how to make your story relatable to the people that you want to attract with it. And we talked about that in Clubhouse. Lucia and I talked about that in Clubhouse. I had a whole room about just, how do you come up with those topics, right? And everything kept going back to, why am I doing this? And so that's where I would tell people to start. And then the other thing I say is focus your topics, right? You don't have to be an expert in everything. So many people are like, well, I own a business, so I'm good at leadership. I'm good at this. I'm good at that. I'm good at that. Right? It's help you stop and focus on like 3 or 4 things and find 3 or 4 spins on each of those things that you can pitch to different shows, different ways, pitch on your show or talk about on your show in different ways. So that as you get your level of expertise out there, as you're establishing that trust, expertise, and authority on your subjects, you're telling it in a focused path that it talks about specifically what you're trying to accomplish with your brand. I see you smiling up there, Corinna.
I love that. And I love how you were discerning enough not to want someone to come on and pitch their pitch, tell the same story they've told every single other podcast interviewer, because you're not only a steward of your podcast, you're a steward for your audience, and you're also a steward for the stories that are coming in and you're disseminating. So that's really important and powerful.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the reasons I try to conduct pre-interviews with most of the guests that I bring on the show, whether it be for Femcasters or for my other show, Care More Be Better, because, I want to hear from them. What is the story they're working to tell, and how might we tell it a little bit differently in our conversation? Or how might we bring a different perspective to the audience, one that will be interesting for them? Because if I get somebody on the phone and they're just repeating the same shtick that they've done on 3 or 4 different shows, for one, they're probably going to be less likely to share it with their communities, which will mean I'll get less listeners. That doesn't serve the show's development, right?
Yep.
Or if they do share it with their communities, people are going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to this. I already listened to this story 6 times. He shared it 6 times, and there's nothing unique or new about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. People get too comfortable in telling the same stories over and over and over again. I had a guest on my show, and he starts talking through a challenge about overcoming some adversity, and he paused. I mean, like just pause. He stopped. He goes, "Nope, I'm going to tell the story I've never ever ever told on any other show before." And it's, to this day, it's one of my best performing episodes because it's totally genuine. I mean, he literally like stopped mid sentence and inserted the story that was it was super cool about his hockey and how he became a goalie and the motivation that it took to get there. So it's those moments, when you create those moments as a guest or as a host, that make a show go just one step beyond just being another podcast, on the internet.
And that's so interesting. And before we wrap up, I mean, you're speaking to the vulnerability, that layer of vulnerability in your story. And I'm just going to speak for Corinna, but we are super fans of Brene Brown and herself as a leader, herself as a speaker. She layers in these stories of vulnerable moments that we can all relate with. And it's hard, but it's easy. Once you start doing it, just do it. You're more than just these like momentary experiences or our jobs or our brands. You are a human being. And when we share that humanistic element of our lives, that's where the magic happens. I will swear on this to the day I die. It's it's the element that connects us. And us as humans, everything is about connection and I'm waving my hands around and I know I'm not supposed to be waving my hands around. So
Oh, but hey, you haven't had the mic once, Jules. So you're doing good.
Corinna's trying to teach me. She's like, don't move around so much when you're talking. But I just noticed I'm moving around and I'm shaking my hands. So
No, but you're saying, I mean, honestly, you're doing a fantastic job. I just received one of the best compliments that I've ever heard about my other podcast, Care More Be Better. And this came from a friend of mine who I never thought would listen to my show because she's such an audiophile junkie, but she only listens to audiobooks pretty much. And so she just told me that what she liked about my interviews was that it felt like I was actively listening to the person that I was interviewing and that I was responding to their questions or getting deeper questions to help them tell their story that meant that they heard something unique. And so I love that. And I've just felt so honored that she finally listened to my show after about a year and that she had that to say about it. She said also that, she's been listening to Rob Lowe's podcast and she stopped because he doesn't seem to be really listening to his guests. It's almost like he's just asking the same question or telling them the same things. And I was like, wow, that was such a different observation than what I expected to hear when I said, well, what did you think of my show? And then she compared me to Rob Lowe. I'm like, okay, well, that was nice.
they're 1-1.
I just want to give you a virtual high five because that's awesome. And, I think people over or underestimate, I should say underestimate the challenge of actually running a show and thinking about, the next questions that you want to ask and the direction you want to take the show, and then still being able to accomplish that. And it's not as easy as I think some of the great podcast hosts out there make it look. You guys included in that, by the way.
Oh, who's your favorite podcast? What's your favorite podcast? Just curious.
My favorite podcast right now,
besides Femcasters.
It's like the one he's on right this minute, right?
Darn it, you took my
no pressure.
No, honestly, I don't have like a favorite podcast. Like my podcasting is like I would rather listen to 100 different shows from different hosts. I listen to different podcasts from a different host almost every day because I love to for me it's about learning, right? I'm learning what they're doing as a host. I'm learning, and I tend to stay in the business podcast space, and so, I can't say that I have a favorite. I listen to everything all the time. I've been listening to, oh crap, what the heck is the name of it? It's an SEO podcast that's pretty.
There's nothing more exciting than an SEO podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, when you're in the marketing world, that's my world.
True. I do like SEO, so I was just joking, but yeah.
But I don't really have a favorite podcast per se. There's things that I look for from a host that, make shows stick out to me more than others. And for me, that's, are they asking the deep questions? Are they getting beyond the surface information? Are they giving something that's, tactful and actionable? Can I walk away from the show and do something with whatever I listen to? Right. Because, for me, that it's about purpose. I'm not a big, I know a ton of people that are into like true crime and, some of the storytelling podcasts and, and that's just not me, but so when I listen to podcasts, it's all about what can I directly take away from it, and go apply. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. And pretty much now I can pick it out in about the first 5 minutes of an episode. I can go, yep, I can listen to all 30 minutes of this, or I'm going to be like gouging my ears out after 5 minutes.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, the reality for me is I have my few favorites that are in the entertainment space more so than in, let's say, a personal development space. And I feel like I'm just constantly seeking to learn from them as well. I try to listen to all of the podcasters that are part of the Femcasters network. I mean, people come in to femcasters.mn.co and a lot of them have brand new podcasts or they're just getting started out and they may not have the full breadth of skills that you tend to develop within the first year of really conducting a show. So I like to listen to them. It gives me new perspectives. Sometimes I hear things that I didn't even think of. Like, for instance, Bailey Bouwman, who I ended up interviewing for Femcasters too. She's one of the podcasters in our group. She has about 100 shows out, so she's been doing it a while. And she shared with me that she has a lot of her guests in this cloth diaper space, and she asks them to pay what they can because it's not a free effort. It costs something to produce a podcast, and most of them will give a donation. And I'm like, wow, that's just such a unique thing that I hadn't thought about doing. And it's one of the ways now that I'm working to monetize Care More Be Better. So it's like you learn from each other. You're constantly listening to how other podcasters are conducting their business to ultimately try and just be a little bit better each day. And so I just think that's great, whether you're listening to a ton of different podcasts to do it or just conferring with other podcasters and learning from them.
Yeah, I listened to, is it Irina's? I think that's how you pronounce her name, the single parent success stories. And it's not a space that I would normally listen to a podcast in, but it came up on Femcasters. And I don't believe in leaving a review without listening to an episode or two at least. And so, but it was really interesting how she approaches, just the storytelling aspect of a show. In every episode, I listened to 3 different episodes. And again, this topic wise totally doesn't relate to anything that's really important to me, but the story of how she was able to drive just the inspirational part of it through each episode was wildly entertaining to me. And it kept me glued in for a couple episodes.
Yeah, that's a
So,
really great point. And I also like to bring Irina's podcast up when there's other individuals who come to us and say something like, well, I have a thick accent and English, and I don't know if people will listen to my show. And I'm like, you have a unique voice. And it really just adds a layer of intrigue if you happen to have an accent. It's like, oh, well, this is something different. So I think that really play your strengths and understand that something different about you can actually be a strength. It's part of that whole authentic message that enables you to get out into the world and build a following and build your brand.
yeah, it's part of the who you are, right? That makes up who you are.
That's right. Well, I just want to thank you, Adam, so much for joining us today. I've really, really enjoyed this discussion. And I just think that overall, we all learned something together here today. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you so much for having me on.
And I know Jules was itching to say something that has some background noise to contend with, because this is part of the life of a
Are
femcaster.
we recording right now? Because my family is nuts. They just all came in and started screaming and like,
Yes, we're still recording.
okay, they're going crazy. So I'm gonna have to take a pause for 1 second. They're beating at my door because they
It's
just
hilarious.
Mom.
This is definitely staying in the episode, just so you know. Well,
I love my little angels, by the way.
I know you do. Well, we like to ask all of our guests to do something a little silly as we prepare to wrap. We ask you to say, kick it.
Kick it.
Kick it, Jules.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Femcasters. We hope you were inspired. We hope you were motivated. We hope you think a little bit differently about how your voice, your very own voice, can change the universe. So tap on those 5 stars, share the love, share this episode with another Femcaster that you think could use this message today.
And head over to femcasters.com for all the goods we covered today, including tools to elevate your voice. You can join our exclusive community and celebrate the Femcaster in you. Together, we can elevate the power and the voice of women girl-wide. Let's do this.